the working class rising up. This is the ruling class punching down.
My day, bigger your day.
First rule of gladiator school, bro. Don't punch down.
Charging into a goblin. Hail Trump!
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Control your own body.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
We can fight the entire grinding system. Nobody can. But together, everybody can.
I did nothing wrong.
Hello and welcome to Did Nothing Wrong Live, the show that cuts through the noise and helps you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff Somke, and with me, once again, is Karl Folk.
Hey all.
In today's episode, we talk about the really horrifying bill that just passed and what effects we're likely to see going forward as a result, and spoiler alert, they're all really bad. We also discuss Elon Musk's new political party, the quote, America Party, unquote, and speculate on how long until it explodes like a SpaceX launch. And we're also really going to talk about the ghoulish and toxic tendency some people have to cheer for natural disasters causing the deaths of people who live in states that don't vote right. Thanks again for your support. Keep listening to learn more, and remember to smash those like and subscribe buttons. Like ICE will probably be smashing in all of our doors here shortly now that they've got a bigger budget than any other government agency. Terrifying.
Some days when we do the intro, I just shake my head, and today, I'm shaking my head, but I have a headache.
Yeah, because you can only shake your head for so long before all of a sudden it's like you feel like your brain's rattling around in there. And I think we're almost at that point where it feels like my brain is, in the words of the Ramones, my brain is hanging upside down.
Yeah. Well, this is the real face of authoritarianism, right? Like it drives people up the wall. Like it literally will drive people mad before it ever comes for them physically, right?
And the short version of this budget is that they cut everything that isn't ICE.
Yeah.
And jacked up the spending on Homeland Security, Immigration and Border Enforcement, to the point where, and this is according to those hippies at the Cato Institute, the libertarian think tank.
Yeah, big hippies over there.
Big hippies over there. It's the one that, Murray Rothbard used to work for. And if you don't know Murray Rothbard, Google him. He's a fun one.
Noted hippie.
Yeah, noted hippie Murray Rothbard. Immigration and Border Enforcement is going to be 2/3 of federal law enforcement spending for fiscal year 2025.
$175 billion, roughly.
This is what they're going to spend money on for the next few years, and they're going to spend more on deportations than anything else. And if the old cliche about show me your checkbook and I'll tell you what you care about is accurate, then it's very clear that the main thing these people care about is deportations. And they have gutted every other angle of government spending to pay for it. And now you've got a quota. They've got a quota to hit, so they're rounding up everyone they can. And if you have to arrest 3,000 people a day, there's going to be a whole lot of shoot first and ask questions later.
No question.
Depending on whose numbers you look at, 60 to 70% of these people that they have detained have absolutely no criminal record whatsoever.
Yeah. I've been calling this, like the bill, what we're seeing, this big, beautiful bill. This is a domestic war bill, right? This is funding a domestic army. That's going to be engaged in what it already is engaged in, which is ethnic cleansing, right? We have to be very, very clear about the language here, because the reality is these aren't just deportations. This is a system of concentration camps and ethnic cleansing. And they are gleeful about it. Mm-hmm. There is a lot being said on Twitter, on whatever X, whatever we're calling the fascist hate machine now. Yeah. You have people who are close confidants of the president and the White House.
Oh, yeah.
Who are known neo-Nazis like Laura Loomer saying 65 million Americans.
I'm going to fight for Christians. I'm going to fight for white people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Laura Loomer. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, when she's saying that the goal is 64 million deportations and she is in the White House with Trump and these people, I think, people have really fundamentally misunderstood how brutal this is about to be.
Mm-hmm.
And as scary as things have been, as grotesque as things have been, this bill is an act of war against all of us. And it's an act of war against all of us who truly believe that no one is illegal.
Yeah. Because, I mean, even if you buy some of their rhetoric about the numbers of people who are undocumented in this country, they don't have 64 million people that deserve, on even their standards, to get deported out of this country.
No.
At some point, that hammer's coming for us.
It's for anyone, right? Like, this goes back to what Trump said during the initial moments that we saw with Bukele, right?
Mhm.
Where he said, we're going to be sending homegrowns next.
Yeah.
And that's the reality, right? Like, this, I think a lot of people want to kind of default to this is, some kind of, that people who are actually looking at this and really walking through what's happening here are wrong or are in some way misconstruing what's going on. And the reality is, for those of us who have done this work for a long time, whether that's you, whether that's me, whether that's a whole host of others within the counter far right academic and research world, this is the thing that we've been saying for a reason, right? Like, because their goal is to ethnically cleanse the United States of anyone who is not white.
Yeah.
And Stephen Miller is on the record saying there should be 100 million Americans who can vote.
Stephen Miller, who, and I keep reiterating this, but when Katie McHugh, former Breitbart editor who used to work directly for Stephen Miller, was on this show, she said that Stephen Miller used to get a list every morning of every person with a Latino name that ended up in a police blotter anywhere in this country. Now, Stephen Miller probably gets that same list and forwards it off to ICE and says, go get them. Go to their hearing. Tell the judge to dismiss the charges. And the minute the charges get dismissed, we're going to take them out. That is what I think they are doing now.
No, and I think, we've seen evidence to where Miller really holds the reins, right? Like, we're seeing that in how it's being, ICE is actually functioning, but also in how the language and the propaganda around ICE is being put out. This is all very much within the white nationalist neo-Nazi circles that he runs in.
Oh, yes.
And, when they're pulling historic imagery using AI to create alligators and calling things alligator, Alcatraz and all these horrifying things instead of what they are, which is a concentration camp that's using the imagery of, mass murder of Black people in the South.
Alligator Auschwitz.
Literally.
I mean,
like,
let's
these
be real
people,
for a minute here.
these people literally are using the imagery of, that's associated with lynching, with what was done to Black people and Black families and whole communities in the South from time immemorial, right? And so they know exactly what they're doing.
This isn't an accident.
No. And that's why I think it's very important to be clear. Like, this is ethnic cleansing. It's at scale, nationwide, and the amount of money they have means they will be building compounds everywhere they can to exterminate whole groups.
And if you've ever worked in a big corporation or worked for the government or worked for anything that does budgeting, one thing that you know real fast is that when you have an enormous budget, you have to spend it every year. Because if you don't spend it, then you get asked why you didn't spend it, and maybe you don't really need that much money going forward. Maybe that was a little too much money we gave you. So ICE is going to spend every bit that they can of what they have been given in this budget. And it comes down to the idea of they are going to go so far to cash that out. They're going to go so far to get that money spent that we're going to end up with stuff that's well past any possible mission these people could have had. It's the stuff that people have been warning about Homeland Security being potentially used for since it was created in the 2000s under Bush. People, including me, said things like, this is terrible. This is going to blow back on us in some real bad ways someday. somebody's going to get a hold of this thing and they're going to use it for really nefarious purposes. You may think right now this is only going to get used against the scary terrorists, but I'm telling you right now, it isn't.
Right.
It's not going to stop there.
Well, and ultimately you redefine what a terrorist is at that
You
point,
have to.
right? Like that's how that works.
And we did it then and we're doing it again.
Yeah, we are truly. And it's really tough, right? Because this isn't, people want this to be easy and, you know, one-sided, and none of this is. And
No.
like when you really get down to it under that, for the bill, right? Like $45 billion of that alone is to expand the detention capacity for ICE to nearly 100,000 beds. And then you have 14 billion for transportation and removals. So that's the equivalent of, that's just so much money. It's unconscionable. And then
even if you take the kickbacks to their friends out of all of that, it's still a ton of fucking money.
It's such an exceptional amount of money that it's shocking, right? Yep. And then you have 8 billion to hire 10,000 new deportation officers, right? So that accounts for some of it. And then there are billions more that are earmarked for state and local cooperation programs between local police and them, along with massive technological upgrades, as well as infrastructure for camera systems and other things, as well as AI systems. So what we're seeing, and what many of us have said, myself included, very vocally, is like, this is the infrastructure for a police state.
Yeah.
And the police state term is very loaded because the far right has used it for so long as part of their conspiracy narrative. But the reality is they literally built conspiracies to inoculate their followers to what we're seeing now. And what we're seeing now is a police state, and it will be used to disappear anyone and everyone they can, not just minorities, not just those that they are, you know, saying they're going after, but it's going to be used in the way that we already have seen, which is to target anyone who they see as a threat. Under this new budget, someone like the new who will be running for mayor, Mandani, he's in deep risk now. People, anyone who speaks out and actually is effectively neutering some of both the right's talking points and some of the corporate talking points that we've seen for the last 30 years that permeate both parties, the more likely it is this budget will be used against them.
Yeah.
A lot has been said about enabling acts over the past few months with Trump. This is very close to what I think we could say is the beginning part of a system of enabling acts that will allow for massive changes to our day-to-day life at every level. And we're already starting to see it.
And what gets me real nervous is when I see people, you know, social media and elsewhere saying, well, we can just fix this in the midterms.
Yeah,
you really
unfortunately,
think they're going to be midterms?
I mean, I'm increasingly concerned that not just that the midterms are at risk, but that we are seeing people place far too much energy in a future date that is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Especially when we've seen what's happened now in Florida, where they've pushed back certain municipal
City of Miami
elections.
City of Miami decided, and you know, I can see the logic of why they did it. It makes sense when they say, well, turnout is way higher in odd number or in even numbered years. Okay, that's totally fine. So if you're going to bump the election back a year, in my opinion, they should have to do what the country of Canada does, which is call an election. Because Canada can run a federal election in anywhere between 37 and 52 days. The Constitution up there says a federal election, once it's called, has to be run between 37 and 52 days. They're very clear about this. You can get an entire country out to vote for that. Pretty sure the city of Miami could figure it out.
Yeah, well, and I think it's really important to realize, like, arbitrary decisions like this that happen more and more, that's how this works, right?
Yeah.
Like, it isn't that people suddenly come out and say, oh, we're fascists and we're not going to have elections anymore. It's just, it's always in limbo. There's always a question.
Yeah.
You know, and you couple that with what has happened in New York City since the primary, and you actually see a pretty solid constellation of systematics running, right? And those systematics really do point out that Trump and the Republicans will do everything in their power to make sure that free and fair elections don't happen if the person who's being elected will literally go against them at every level.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what at least makes me feel a little better about all of this is that there's a new political party on the horizon that promises to solve all of these issues with corruption and everything else. And, the guy's got an amazing track record of living up to his promises. And, he never overpromises and underdelivers anything.
No.
Give it up for Elon Musk and the America Party. He is starting a political party. And, again, who knows how long this is actually going to last or whether it's true or any of the rest of it. Because, this whole thing reeks of fucking kayfabe. Oh, let's have him and Trump have a fight and let's start this new party. It's like, fuck off.
And I don't actually even, I wouldn't go down the kayfabe route even. I just look at this as someone who is pissed, who is also, a fucking Nazi, and decided to take the name from
another
history
Nazi party.
From another Nazi party
back in the day.
And he's appealing to his base, which is a bunch of David Duke clones and a bunch of guys who have pretty much effectively said the only goal here is to do what we like, whatever horrible thing that is.
Yeah.
I don't even believe it's real, right? Like the guy tweeted, now the news is treating it like the guy went out and friggin' planted his flag on Mars, even though we're still waiting 20 years after, 10 years after the fact for that to happen.
Has SpaceX actually made it out of high orbit?
Near Earth orbit?
Near Earth orbit? Have they made it out?
That's a great,
just out of curiosity?
Pieces of a couple of the rockets must have, considering how bad they exploded.
Occupy Mars. Good luck.
I think this is going to be an Occupy Mars on your laptop kind of thing. This is like a Kerbal Space. If he's doing it in Kerbal Space Program, maybe, right? Like he's occupying it on a computer program. He's definitely not doing it in real fucking life.
We've got a much better chance. Yeah, he's not going to get there. And
no.
I think everybody kind of knows it by now. The man can't even sell 5,000 Teslas a quarter now. Like literally,
it's kind of hard.
It's the biggest flop in automotive history. Makes the Edsel look like a Honda Civic or something at this point in the game.
Which is amazing considering the Edsel.
Fucking euphemism that everybody has used since that car came out for automotive industry failure has been Edsel. And now the Cybertruck is selling like a quarter of what that sold.
Yeah.
Ford had the sense to pull the plug on that thing after 2 years. When's Elon going to figure it out?
I think this might be one of those times where we very clearly see he is unable to stop. Like he's got the double down of a true gambler, right?
Oh, yes.
And this gamble for him is already paid off immeasurably, right? Like he's got all the money he can ever want now from Trump, even though there's this fight going on. But the reality is he doesn't necessarily, it seems, want the money. What he wants is the respect and to be seen as cool. And you just can't buy that shit, right? Like you can't buy that shit even if you're the wealthiest man in the world who happens to also have the ear of the president. And that, that's incredibly good.
You're still you're still the guy that hires people to game for you.
Yeah. And then gets really mad when people point it out. But that's the thing, as dark as all of this has been, for me, it would be a lot worse if someone like Musk was garnering massive support and it was really organic and it was all this other stuff. But this guy gets laughed out of every room he's in, even in rooms where he's paying the people.
He might be the least popular person in America. Everybody's approval rating ain't great these days, but Musk's, I don't think there's a floor. I think it's Silicon Valley tech bros who probably laugh at him behind his back that are on his side, and that's about it.
And even I don't know if they're really on his side beyond how do we get his money, right? It's really, I think there's so much of this kill or be killed social Darwinianism of sorts within the wealthy elite, but more specifically that part of the Silicon Valley elite that they don't care as long as they get what they need out of them. Who cares? There's a lot of this that is ideological. Right? There is a big Curtis Yarvin dark enlightenment, neo-reactionary techno-fascist part, but there's also a part where it's, people just, the guy sucks.
Yeah.
Like, the guy sucks and everyone knows.
Absolutely zero charisma.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, how many kids has he got and how much did he pay the moms? This
Yeah.
is just, comes out to press conferences just drooling out of his head on ketamine. It's
Yeah.
very clear that this guy is like not okay, but he's that rich guy that people put up with because he's got so much money.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people on the right especially thought he was on their side, when the reality is he's just a racist who wanted to get power, right?
Mhm.
Like, and that's a big difference than the rest of the racists who want power on that side.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an absolutely huge difference. And it worked for him, kind of until it didn't. And now he's trying to figure out either a way to get back in, or this is like his somehow attempt to get back into the game. He's just
Right.
It's hard to say what the real end game is here, but like
Yeah.
you said earlier, the minute we see some FBC paperwork with his name on it, then we can take this thing seriously.
Well, and that's how I feel about it, right? Like, anytime Musk puts out a tweet and then we have this firestorm of press, this is the Trump thing, right? Like, where they're trying to kind of make fetch happen.
Yeah.
And it's just not there, right?
No.
Like, I think politics, overall, we've seen politics really shift in this country, not just on the right wing. Everything's now, the fascist planet kind of thing, but like the actual on the ground response by most people to both Trump and Musk and their politics is, most people abhor this.
Yeah.
Like, when you look at the numbers, like, a majority of people do not agree with any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually pretty rare in the moment. Like, when you look back at something like civil rights, for example, right? That was deeply unpopular at the time. Like, deeply unpopular. And,
we celebrate Martin Luther King now, but holy shit, did we not at the time?
Well, and it's a really sanitized version now, right? Because of that anger, because of that vitriol, he had to be sanitized, right? And it's the same thing we've seen with other really powerful kind of revolutionary or horrifying moments, where it gets plucked out of a timeline of contextual history.
Yeah.
And it gets turned into a singular event that's kind of in a vacuum and doesn't have all, the huge tendrils into other things that that they do. And, that's tough. People want some simple, like, oh, well, we can fight this way or this way or this way. When the reality is, like, there are 1,000 different things happening at any one moment, and it's very rare to see a growing consensus in that moment against the negative, what we all know is negative. That's very rare.
But we're
seeing that.
We're seeing it. And that's the part that's amazing, is that there are still hundreds of people at every Tesla dealership in the country every Saturday showing up with signs. And we are still seeing people in the streets protesting ICE. We're seeing millions of people come out when they've had enough lead time to protest, to say things like, hey, no kings. And regardless of how bad some of the organizers of these protests and these events try to fuck them up, it doesn't seem to matter, because people want that. People want to make their opinions felt, and they're willing to do it regardless of how stupid and inconsistent some of the people who have put these events on have been.
No, there are huge problems, right? And this is one of those universal problems with a truly decentralized movement, as it looks the 5051 is.
Yeah. And, it does appear to be decentralized, and it does appear to be like,
I fully believe it is, right? Like, looking at their paperwork in this,
they're a mess.
It's terribly a mess. They're, as much as I think some of us would, would say this is some, like, Democratic National Convention.
The fuck it is,
right? No, fuck no. This is a truly decentralized thing.
The paperwork would be more in order. They'd have more. They'd have their shit together.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm more on board having it be decentralized.
Same here.
Than anything else. The Democratic National Committee cannot get anywhere near this and have it stay real.
No.
But they're also, this is the other part, right? Like, there are issues, right? And there have been some deeply problematic things, but there is an appetite, and people want a way to push back that feels like they're actually doing something, and giving them that is good.
Hmm.
especially as it does appear it's opening the doors for other people to kind of give themselves permission to keep walking down that road of protest, direct action, educating themselves within those spaces too, as to where maybe they've had blind spots to either historic racism or injustice of some kind.
Yeah.
And it also shows that, like, this isn't scary in the way that a lot of people think it is. It's more scary to take the first step and say, look, something's wrong,
Yeah.
right, than it is to go and say, wow, there are a bunch of people here who are all saying it's wrong too.
And they
And
all look a lot like me, and we're all
yeah,
saying kind of the same thing. Maybe
yeah,
there's something to this.
there's an entry level thing with the 5051
Yeah.
rallies that's incredibly important, right? Like, most people in this country think, and aren't going to just show up, aren't going to just appear out of the woodwork one day as like Black Bloc,
Yeah.
or
Not gonna
as
happen.
or as communist vanguarders, right? And honestly, that's probably good for all of us that
Yeah.
we don't have massive polity shifts in that way. But also, this is right in line with who we've always been as a country, right? Like,
Right.
on the ground, this country is radical as hell, likes to be loud, and hates this kind of shit. And we
Right.
always have, right? Like, historically, if you look at something like the 1910s, right? Like, that's an era that I've been thinking a lot about in the context of Trump and the response to Trump and the racism of Trump and all of this. Because that was an era where, like, it was, again, big change was happening, both technologically and politically and demographically and all these things. And, I mean, hell, people were blowing up like the LA Times.
Oh yeah.
They were literally, anarchists were literally throwing bombs, the true rednecks. So when I say that, I mean, mine workers and other
Yeah.
deeply hardworking Americans who were laborers were in, like, running battles with the federal government in Pinkertons.
Hmm.
Like, this is something that has always been with us, right?
Yeah.
And so, in some ways, it's really important for all of us to see that energy and to understand that we are a part of it, whether we want to be or not. This is who we are as a country. We are not like this even end of history myth that we've gotten for the last 30 years, where we are a group of people who genuinely wants the best for as many people as we can, even though at times it doesn't look like that. When you look at what people who are fighting those fights are saying throughout history, it's similar, whether that's the wide awakes, whether that's the abolitionists, whether that's, John Brown in the raid. He's a weird outlier in a lot of ways because of the religious side, but also he's right in line with other parts of the abolitionist movement at the time, whether that was, the Mennonites or whoever. And I think that's really important for people to remember. Like, this, we fight for the soul of this country every day.
Yes.
And that's never changed. And the fact that we believed it did for a while is in part the reason we're here now, is because we thought that you didn't have to fight for it every day. And other people did.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's the problem
with
an end of history narrative, is that people get lazy. They think, oh, well, hey, it's all going to be fine from now on. Demographics is destiny. And they don't realize that there was like going to be the enemy gets a vote here.
Yeah.
And the enemy figured out how to make their vote pretty effective.
Well, and they built the infrastructure, right? Like, the thing that, I think we all forget is, like, civil rights, for example.
Right.
There was 100 years of infrastructure built by abolitionists, by different groups throughout that period that brought us to the moment where somehow they beat the system for a moment.
Right.
And
just long enough.
No, literally. And yeah, and that's the thing, right? And it's also, personal, like, people's personal choices come into play in moments like that, right? Like, LBJ made the decisions he did because he felt conviction to do so, right?
Yeah.
And there was also probably political calculus. He also, like, none of this is simple.
No.
None of it's binary. None of it's black and white. None of it's the simple, kind of nonviolence one narrative. It's none of those things. It's years of hard work. It's years of people being killed. It's years of just the worst violence and language imaginable to get there.
Right.
The right figured that out, and they said, well, if they can do social change, so can we. We just happen to want to do it towards fascism so we can end history.
Yeah. And the thing we got to watch out for, or at least one of the things we got to watch out for, is people who see that hunger for change, people who see that desire for something different, something to come along, and they figure out how they can monetize that.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly frustrating to see. It's something we've seen so much of since Trump's first election in 2016. We saw a whole bunch of people really angry. They went basically running to the internet to try and figure out what they could do about this. And some real sharp operators figured out how to monetize this. And they're still around. And a lot of these people are, failed grifters from one stripe or another. They're Republicans who realized that they weren't in with what Trump was doing and they weren't going to get to gravy train themselves on that. And you saw a real shift, I think, in how these people got other people to refer to the people that they opposed at that point. Like, for instance, there was some real bad flooding in Texas this week. A lot of people died as a result of this flooding. They're still tracking down bodies. They're still trying to figure out what happened in some of these cases. The Guadalupe River, not a drop of rain in the area recently until it started raining. And then the river rose 26 feet in an hour.
Yeah.
And by Saturday afternoon, 43 people were dead, 15 children.
Yeah. Yep.
And I don't care who you are. That's a tragedy. People died.
Of the worst kind.
You're cheering for that, and you're saying things like, well, they got what they deserve for voting the way they did. I mean, that's awful. That's ghoulish.
That is an abandonment of your humanity, right? And like, this is one of the things where, like, if you are preying on people who are looking for hope in a moment where things feel really hopeless, or you're preying on people who need a community, and you start injecting people in red states need to, deserve whatever happens to them narratives.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of poison.
What's the functional difference between that and saying that blue states need to have the wrath of God dropped on them for doing abortion?
There's no difference. None whatsoever.
Exactly.
And if you agree with that sentiment that kids deserve to die because their parents, maybe not even somebody they know, voted the wrong way, then do me a favor. You can hit stop on this podcast and stop listening to what we do right now.
Yeah. No, literally.
Yeah.
We don't want your money.
I don't want you. Try to listen to what I've been saying, what Carl's been saying, what Jay had been saying. We don't buy into any of that. I mean, if you want that, Midas Touch is right down the street. You could go there. And
go talk to Ron.
Right. Ron Filipowski, man, step on up, buddy. Yeah. Because I've been doing this for like almost 3 years now when it comes to podcasting. And one thing I've always tried to make very clear is that the vast majority of people in this world live under some pretty shitty government.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they deserve to die.
No.
Example, Vladimir Putin is one of the most evil pieces of shit humanity has ever managed to produce. That does not mean I want Russians to die. I want Russians to have the chance to do something they've never had the chance to do, which is live under decent government.
Amen.
I would say that about the people in the CCP too. I don't have any use for the CCP, but boy, there's billions of Chinese people who do not deserve to suffer under this.
No, exactly. And that's just it, right? Like the human view of this is to understand that suffering is bad no matter who's suffering.
Yeah.
Right? And like, yes, fascists deserve to be tried and they deserve to be dealt with through the legal framework that we understand.
Exactly.
That's a whole bunch different than saying they deserve to die miserable deaths.
Yeah.
When most red states, and again, this gets into the bigger argument that you and I have had with others and exists across a lot of spheres. The red state, blue state, kind of way of looking at this is incredibly dangerous because it dehumanizes a huge portion of a population that was born into a place that they couldn't change because the politics were already authoritarian around
Right.
them. Look at somewhere like Mississippi. Look at somewhere like Texas.
Right.
No matter how hard people vote, you cannot vote out an autocratic regime who has built the systems to keep you forever in a one-party state. It's
Right.
not possible. And we just, that's the problem, right? So when we get into a place where you're starting to see more and more language of let them die, they deserved it, or worse,
Yeah.
you're deep into a place that's not just reprehensible, it's radicalization.
Yeah.
And you like I have done a lot of work talking to people who have either been within radical right-wing circles or other radical groups and have come out. And this is the story that you hear.
Yeah.
Is we were desperate for help. We found someone online who sounded like they were trying to help us. And then 4 or 5 steps down that road, suddenly they're talking about how X, Y, or Z group is dangerous and needs to be exterminated. And what we've seen is an intellectual framework built around the red state, blue state dynamic in certain parts of liberal circles.
I know.
That's really dangerous.
And I mean, do I wish states like Texas voted differently? I mean, hell yes. But all you have to do is Google Ken Paxton corruption to get an idea of the kind of scumbags that are running these states and how they've managed to just rig and gerrymander themselves into what amounts to a lifetime appointment. And yes, the people in Texas deserve better. The people in Mississippi deserve better.
All day, every
the
day.
people, not just the ones I agree with. And until you
Exactly.
find a way to get rid of Ken Paxton and those like him, they're not going to get anything better. And their lives are only going to get worse. I mean, that man's running for the Senate now.
Yeah.
And I don't think blaming people who have been historically disenfranchised and are still being disenfranchised to this day is helpful.
No,
I think it's really fucking awful when people die in natural disasters. It makes me so fucking mad to see people who are supposedly on my quote unquote side cheering for that. And if that's how you feel about it, you can go sit with MAGA.
Yeah. There's no functional difference between the people, like I said, saying that God divined retribution against a blue state because they did abortions, and people saying that red state people deserve to die because they didn't vote right. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're Americans. We don't leave other Americans to fucking die. It just doesn't matter. And yeah, there are some arguments on MAGA, sure, on the American part. But you know what? Look at how many people voted for a Democrat in Texas versus New York City or New York State.
Yeah. We've got guys like executive editor of Midas Touch, Ron Filipkowski, however you say it.
Yeah.
These people in Texas voted for government services controlled by Donald Trump and Greg Abbott, and that's exactly what they're getting. And then somebody comes in and makes a point that, hey, Texas has a population of 31,290,831. 6,375,376 people voted for Trump. That's like a sixth of the people who lived there. And, the rescuers probably aren't checking to see who you voted for before they're hauling you out of the water.
No.
So you're talking about like a sixth of the people that live in this state voted for this. And your high and mighty ass seems to think that they deserve it because a sixth of your population voted for this awful person. And
that's not how we function. And that is not how we can go forward and be anything resembling a democracy and anything resembling human.
Yeah.
Right. And the reality is it sucks, but we cannot leave anyone behind. And the fact that the Democrats have not effectively tried to run in these states and have somewhat abandoned them at the same time that they've said they deserve whatever comes to them isn't a recipe to win. It's a recipe to continue losing and making yourself absolutely a pariah.
Yeah.
And that's it outside of the disgusting anti-human part of it. It's deeply un-American. Like everyone knows how I view a lot of this. And I have a very different view than a lot of people. But the reality is a multiracial pluralist democracy that represents all of us means all of us.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing terrible politics, we can't write people off. Now, there are certain parts of MAGA that have to be written off and we got to deal with.
Right.
But a vast majority of people yeah, they might have voted for Trump.
And can I say it's fucking amazing that like those parts of MAGA that I would be just totally fine with writing off, like Laura Loomer, are actually working with people like Ron. And have been for a while. That's the part that drives me like up the wall. It's like, just because I may agree with one of these people on something, and I might.
Right.
I mean, I haven't looked at every policy position Laura Loomer's got. For all I know, I do agree with her on something. But
I don't, but
it
also
doesn't fucking matter. I wouldn't work with her. I wouldn't boost her content. I wouldn't help team with her to take down a politician I didn't like. Hell no. Do it on your own.
No,
Hell
and that's just it,
no.
right? Like, and people try and tell all of us who have been saying this for years, like, well, politics makes strange bedfellows. I'm sorry.
Doesn't have to.
If your bedfellow is a fucking Nazi, but not your local democratic socialist, well, there's one reason you're making that decision then.
Yeah.
And I think, this goes more broadly to the thing we're seeing now, as it becomes clear that like certain parts of the Democratic Party can't change without it destroying them.
No.
And that plus true change coming at them from two directions at once, one being fascists with a steamroller and a shotgun, and the other side from people saying, look, we all deserve a fair chance.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who you are. We all deserve something fair and that represents us as a population, but also shows that just because you don't work X, Y, or Z job or live in X, Y, and Z place, you still matter.
Right.
And that is real interesting, right? Like, this is something you and I have talked about. It's something you and I, when we've had Jared on, have talked about. Like, there is a dangerous...
It's like, God, Jay, who's on this show sometimes, Jay lives in Tennessee.
Yes.
Jay grew up around all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he understands completely this whole dynamic. And at first it was like, hey, here's me from, a part of Washington originally that's not terribly liberal. Go look up Spokane sometime. And then, working with a guy who is from a part of Tennessee that's not especially liberal either. Yeah. And you finally kind of realize, hey, maybe there's good people in all of these places. Exactly. And sometimes people just haven't heard the way it gets put that it sticks.
Yeah.
You can't write them off. You just can't.
some of the most radically like forward thinking people I know are living in red states, consistently doing work that a lot of people within Democratic Party circles, love, but don't do. No. Which is they're trying to organize people to vote. They're going out and trying to counter Moms for Liberty at their local, at their local schools in a place where that is actually dangerous.
You're going to get death threats. You're going to get calls. You're going to get people
minimum
calling you and putting you on lists.
Yeah. I mean, and that's if you're white, right? Like, so when you really talk about it and think about it, the large portion of these states we're talking about are minorities, and they are doing the hard work and scary work of standing up to white power in its true form, in its institutional form. And they're doing that without any institutional support from broader Democratic Party officials who have written them off and said, you deserve to die. And that should tell people what this is, right? Because we all have to make a decision. And unfortunately, those decisions have to be based on the real world of this, not on the word of people who clip other people's work and say it's their own.
Right.
And not on the face of a group that takes money from people who are desperate and scared and offers them nothing but absolutely the most vile, bigoted, and homophobic memes imaginable.
Yeah.
And tells them that's resisting fascism. And that people like you or I, or any of the hundreds of other people doing amazing work in this country are too radical. And the reality is, this is a constraint, right? Like this is a group trying to tell you what is okay and what isn't. And it's a very narrow definition. That should be seen for what it is, which is a dangerous grift of people who are demanding better and never received it. And it's people like Midas and Ron and others who set the ground for Trump.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if people had actually practiced politics that changed people's day-to-day material reality for the better in the way that we're starting to see with someone like Mamdani and others,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have gotten to a point where people were so desperate they would have grabbed on to the first person to say the right things, which is you matter.
Yeah.
Even if they're lying. And we know Trump was lying. And he's going to throw his followers under the bus at some point.
Always. It's what
Always.
he does.
Yes. And what we have to understand is at that point, you're already through you're far gone into the authoritarian world. But more importantly, we're going to have to go in and do the hard work that the Democratic Party has refused to do, which is to say these people matter.
Mm-hmm. But the nice thing is, I think people are starting to kind of see that. They're starting to realize that, like, the Democrats aren't coming to save you.
Yep.
The Hakeem Jeffries, the Chuck Schumers, they're not coming to save you. You know,
out of here.
We got Hakeem Jeffries setting another record for longest speech in the House. And then, you know, the big, beautiful bill passes anyway, and he sends out a fundraising email.
Yeah.
I mean, for fuck's sake, can you not see it yet?
No, and that's just it, right? Like you and I have talked about this on this show. I've talked about it in other places. I've written about it. Like the reality is the theater's dead.
Yeah.
And people are just starting to figure it out. And those of us who have known are being gaslit about it. But the reality is the neoliberal establishment is dead. They are either going to have to do their own party coup like MAGA did.
Yeah.
Or they're going to go the way of the Democratic or other parts of the Democratic Party in the past where, you know, like the Dixiecrats. Yeah. So the reality is this is the end of the line for something, right? And it's the birth of something new. And if we allow it to be, and we really accept that some of this has been really bad politics, we can build something truly amazing. And it represents all of us, not just people we think are important, because we're all important. I don't care what people say. We're all important. And at the end of the day, like, we have to get down to basics here. No one's illegal. You can't be illegal. You're a human being. That's not how this works. Like we accepted a very nice statue from France on this at one point in our history. And it's sitting on the East Coast in the city that's about to be won by someone who looks a lot more like that city than anyone who's won as mayor in a long time.
Right. And it'll be real interesting to see after all the demonization, after all the shit talking, after all the stupid little scandals that they've tried to dredge up about this guy. It'll be real interesting to see how after a couple of years of this guy running the show, how people feel about it then. And it'll be very intuitive, I think, or very instructive, I think, to look back and point out to them, hey, remember all the shit they said this guy was going to do?
Yeah.
Remember how they said this guy was going to do this and all that, and your taxes were going to go up, and he was going to commie Muslim your whole city into God knows what?
I swear to God, if I hear more Bircher framing coming out of both sides of the equation, I am going to start weeping.
Well, and part of the reason they're wetting their pants with glee about it is because this is what they always tried to say Barack Obama was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, this is just a continuation.
He's born in Kenya. He's born in Uganda. He's a Muslim. He's got a funny name.
Well, this guy was. He is.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't give a shit because he's still going to win because most people don't care.
Yeah. Can he do the job?
Exactly. That's what they're voting on it about. It's not some weird identity politics. It's, is he going to govern effectively?
Would you rather have him or the corrupt ex-cop who's taken money from God knows who and how many? Or the sex pest?
Yeah.
You know, who do you want here?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, like we have seen a pretty interesting shift even in the last few days in regards to that. And, you know, that's because Trump threatened the guy.
Yeah.
Right. And so you got de Blasio out there, who I do not always have nice things to say about and probably won't continue to beyond this. But, you know, when he's saying stuff like we're going to put a human shield around this guy if you come for him, that should tell people where this is about to go. The wind is starting to shift in a major way. And people who know what the wind feels like are starting to feel it. And frankly, like
about time.
about time. It's about time. It's about time. And we have to just accept it. And like, it's scary, right? Change is scary. But you know what? Positive change feels scary as hell at the time. But you look back on it and you say, that wasn't scary. I just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah. And this is where we are right now. We got some change coming.
Whether we like it or not.
We're going to get through this, I think. I really do.